Hello, Sumo fans, and welcome to a special live chat edition of 42 Opinions. There is a lot going on in this July tournament, more than I expected. It's kind of weird. It's probably the weirdest tournament I've seen in a while, between the COVID situation that is wreaking havoc. This is really the first opportunity for COVID to wreak havoc. Simply because at first there were no fans allowed in, then they started gently letting fans in, and there were like the pods, so only certain people were getting COVID, but now it's a free-for-all where all the fans are back, all the wrestlers are interacting, everybody's mingling, and COVID is not exactly going away. It seems like it's going to be around forever, and so there's no way to avoid it. So now we have a messy situation where there's all these rules that were made for COVID that don't work when everybody gets COVID. So I'm going to get into that after I talk about sort of where we are and the state of the tournament, and then we can talk a little bit about the state of the Ozeki. So right now on day 9, we have 6 guys that are 7-2. Wild. And we actually had 7 guys who were 7-2 until COVID robbed Ichi Yamamoto of an opportunity to stay in the race. This guy is, he's got some bad luck. This one's got a sting. So before I get into that whole topic, let's just talk about the guys who are in it, and hopefully they stay in it. Hopefully there's no COVID in any of their stables, and we get to finish this tournament without a disaster. So the top guy of the tournament is one of the top guys in this category, Teruno Fuji. He's typically the guy that you would expect to win it all. And, there's still a high likelihood that he'll win it all. However, he's been kind of falling apart physically for a while now. So it's not a guarantee that he is going to do what he can do. Right behind him is Kota Nowaka, who is sort of the rising star that we've been expecting to do something. And he's starting to show what he's capable of at the right time. And he's starting to make a push the way that a rising star should make a push. Like, you should be in the conversation. However, there's still, practically a full week of sumo left, so it might be premature to say that Kota Nowaka is finally showing his stuff. But let's just say that, there's a really good chance, there's some excitement here that he might be finally showing that there are young guys who not only are talented, but can be the next Ozeki, can be the next tournament winner. So we're going to see. I'm cautiously optimistic about Kota Nowaka. Very, very cautious. Next, we have Ichinojo, whom I expected was going to be more in the conversation. He was the sole leader for several days. And then when he got that second loss, he sort of opened the door for everybody else. And this is going to be the question for him. Is Ichinojo actually going to do better now that all the focus isn't on him? Or is he going to fade away like he typically does? Is it going to be a situation where all these other guys are in the conversation and now Ichinojo's going to go into his sort of Snorlax ways? I have a hard time believing that he isn't super fired up and that he isn't going to be going just as hard as he was when he was the sole leader. But there's just not a whole lot of history where Ichinojo is making a run like this. The only time I remember Ichinojo making a run like this was a couple of years ago when he was right behind Hakuho and they did not give him an opportunity to fight Hakuho on the last day. And I know that probably had a lot to do with Hakuho, who was not a huge fan of Ichinojo, and There's some Mongolian tribalism going on with that. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like I said, there's so much time left that it's hard to believe that we really can know tonight what's going to happen. Next, we have Toby Zarro, who's come out of nowhere. John and I have joked several times in the past, and we've sort of rated this, that Toby Zarro seemed almost like an imposter in the upper division. And that was because just out of nowhere, he was, climbing in the ranks, and he, still kind of looked like a Jurio man. Not to be disrespectful, but he just hadn't put it all together. So it was a question of, did he get lucky and get up here, and was he going to crash back down to Jurio, or was there something there? And he's hung on for dear life when things weren't good, and he's slowly building his way up. So I love his style. I absolutely love his style. I love that he's sort of contained the craziness, so to speak. He's usually all over the place. That's why he's called the Flying Monkey. And this time he sort of contained the chaos, is the best way I can put it. And he's just doing his usual, throws and flying push-outs. But this time, the opponent is flying out of the ring more times than him. I find that interesting. I would love to say that he's going to be in this conversation to the very end. I hope so. I really have this sort of secret love for Toby Zarro where I've always been afraid to root for him because then bad things happen. But I want to root for him now. So I'm going to root for him. Hopefully that is not jinx on him, because my Daisho pick was a complete disaster. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. He's right in the middle of that pack. And we have a question here from Michael. Has Shodai finally woken up? Shodai is going to be covered in the State of the Ozeki topic, and I'll be interested to see what you have to say. So next we have Nishikigi. Now he's a veteran who's been around for a long time, and we kind of saw when he came back up to the upper division that he's kind of doing his comeback tour. Like an old school rocker or something. Like, he came to play. And I can't believe he's in the playoff conversation. Like I said, there's a lot of time left. But it's really, really cool that he's pushing so hard. I mean, his sumo looks great. And he's another guy like Tamawashi where you wouldn't necessarily think that's an old guy if you didn't know. So that's super, super cool that Nishikigi's in this conversation. Next, we have Nishiki Fuji. Now, here's the interesting thing about Nishiki Fuji. It's been a little while, but will that lucky last place situation happen? We've had several last place winners win the whole tournament. Is this now Nishiki Fuji? That's a tough one. Nishiki Fuji's turn. I would be so thrilled, so absolutely thrilled if Nishiki Fuji wins the tournament and we can go back on our crazy, Maegashira 17 is going to win the tournament thing. So these are your guys who are in it right now. There's actually not many guys who can threaten them at this point. The records are all over the place. Unless this turns into a tournament where somebody is going to win 11-4. The only other two guys who can challenge are Takakeisho and Chiyotairyu. And they are 6-3 each. So the issue here is Takakeisho not looking great. This has been an issue for a while now. I really believe that his neck is a serious problem, and I don't think he's ever going to have that fixed. There's no way to fix a neck problem, and I think he's fighting through a lot of pain, and I think he's fighting through a lot of disbelief because it's cut his power in half, and that's tough. I don't know how you have so much love and passion for a sport, and now an injury of this nature takes you out of your game. And we're going to talk a little bit in the state of Ozeki, some of the things that have been going on. So as much as I would love to say Takakeisho is going to come back and he's going to be in this conversation and he's going to win, I don't know if he ever can. He's really, you can see that he's not a one-note guy because he doesn't want to do anything else. I think he's a one-note guy because his power is gone, and that's where he put everything in. And he's not like the other guys who have nice long arms. He's got these short little arms, so he could try to grab Mawashis. He would get shaken right off. He has to work with the body he has. So unless he wants to start tripping people and start doing Ashitori leg picks, his future lies in being able to blast people out. And when that's not working, you start getting crazy stuff like pulling the top knot. Obviously, Chiyo Tairyu, the idea that he would come back and win is probably something even he wouldn't consider. So I just say, let's enjoy the fun of Chiyo Tairyu just even being partially in the conversation. So next, by request, I'm going to talk about the state of Ozeki. And let's talk about Shodai first, since we have that question. Shodai seems to be doing what he did the last time he was Kadoban. It's almost like he needs the pressure to bring out the best of his sumo. I don't know why that is, but there are so many people in the world where they can say that's the case. People who are in college and they have to write a paper and they say they write their best paper at 2 o'clock in the morning the day before their 7 a.m. class. That's Shodai. Without this pressure, he just is too relaxed. He's too either relaxed or he's too nervous, or something goes on where it's like, oh, I can try again tomorrow. Oh, it wasn't my day. Well, I'll do it again. And it's until his back is up against the wall. Then you see the Shodai who became Ozeki. And it looks like with a record of 5-4 and Takakeisho not looking that great, Takayumi out, which we're going to talk about him, and then Teruno Fuji, who's always a little iffy, although I think he could beat Shodai on one leg, honestly. It looks like Shodai's got a really good chance of pulling off the exact same thing he did the last time. And it's, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun that he's like that. I mean, in some ways, sumo is so full of pressure, right? We need the next Yokozuna. We need the next Ozeki. We need these guys to be performing right. But if you look at the whole card as sort of like for entertainment's sake, if you take off the seriousness, it's kind of cool that a guy like Shodai exists. A guy that you have no idea what's going to happen. A guy who's going to be the underdog, even when he's supposed to be the top guy. He keeps things interesting. So I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I read a lot of comments on other videos because I find it very interesting to see what the sumo community thinks about things. And there's people who just, Shodai, he's terrible. How could he ever be Ozeki? Can't wait for him to get demoted. And it's like, why? What does it matter? I mean, yes, Ozeki does have a certain prestige to it, and it would be absolutely wonderful if they could live up to that prestige. But at least Shodai is making it interesting for us. So speaking of this whole Ozeki thing, I'm going to talk about what's going on with Takakeisho and Takayumi, and then talk about future Ozeki situation. So now Takayumi, there's no way to get away from the fact that this is controversial. And to be honest, I don't know the answer. I'm going to just throw out all the positions that are out there and go from there. I don't know the answer. I'm glad I don't work in the Sumo Association. So he hurts his shoulder last tournament. He comes in, he's Kadoban, he's got a fight with a busted shoulder. It's pretty obvious that's not going to go well. Very few guys can wrestle with an injured shoulder, let alone have this Kadoban thing. That's the horrible part about being Ozeki, and that's going to go into the more in-depth conversation. But he's got to fight now. He can't rest it properly to save his rank. And definitely, I'm pretty confident he was going to lose his rank. Pretty confident in that. And then he gets, for lack of a better term, the COVID save. This would be the most controversial of all the COVID saves. It was definitely brewing. Like, something like this was going to happen. Because when you create a rule like they created, it's bound to backfire. So all the guys who've ever gotten COVID, they're able to maintain their rank. The only guy, coincidentally enough, that didn't get this privilege was Ichinojo. They actually dropped him down when every other guy's maintained their exact rank. Didn't seem to hurt him, though, but it's interesting that they did that. So now, it's kind of like, and I'm not trying to push conspiracies, I'm just saying the thoughts that might be running through people's heads, and I've read them in the comment section. You know, Takayumi's got almost no way out, and he just became Ozeki, and there's this continual problem with the Ozeki. Do you go out and just get COVID? Because you know this is the only shot you have to preserve your rank? Or was this completely a coincidence? We will never know, because now COVID is all over the place. It's knocking out stable after stable. We'll be super lucky if we can get through this tournament without any other issues. But it is interesting how many times they did not test for COVID during a tournament prior to this one. It's almost like they opened Pandora's box. For whatever reason, they tested Takayumi, probably because he was Kadoban, and now it's forcing them to test everybody. It seems like probably there were wrestlers that fought with COVID during previous tournaments. It seems crazy that it would just happen now. Maybe it did. Not pushing conspiracy theories, just saying these are some of the thoughts running through people's minds. I don't know what you do in this case, because you have set the precedent that, first of all, if you get COVID, you must leave the tournament, which I totally get. That's the way we've been doing things. And, you know, do you want a sick person who can infect everybody fighting in the tournament? No. And you've set the precedent that you will maintain your rank. So, and the Ozeki is the only one who's sort of in a serious situation when they are injured and can't fight. Nobody else has the same problems that the Ozeki have. And that's going to be part of the state of the Ozeki conversation. So, I don't know how else you would handle it. But it stinks for all those guys that lost Ozeki in the past who didn't have a COVID save. It does show you that there is no right answer when it comes to Ozeki. I mean, maybe there needs to be a major policy change to make it more fair. But at this point, it is what it is. Takayumi gets a save. Hopefully recovers well from COVID. And we start all over again in September. Now we talk about Takakeisho and the infamous top knot. There were a lot of people who were mad in the comment section about what Takakeisho did. And if I'm going to be fair, because I got on Takayumi for Henka, and I got on Hakuho for celebrating after he beat Teruno Fuji, which if I had known that it was Hakuho's very last match of his career, I wouldn't have gotten on him. I got on him because I was afraid that the Sumo Association would punish him greatly and then he couldn't continue on. If I knew he wasn't going to continue on, I'd be like, yeah, celebrate all day long. That's wonderful. It was sort of like my protective instincts that went against Hakuho because I just didn't want them to mess with him anymore. But that's aside. So to be fair, it's not very Ozeki to do what Takakeisho did. I agree. My biased self can't change my opinion of him. I still really like him. He's still my favorite. It was a little disappointing to me that he did it. But I get it. I understand why people were thrown off by it. The commentators didn't like it. I'm sure he got reamed out behind the scenes. I'm sure his coach got reamed out. But to play devil's advocate, and to throw my biased self out there, Takakeisho has had nothing but really rough time since he's become Ozeki. And he's frustrated. And I watched the Sumo Stew video, which kind of give me some more perspective on Takakeisho. He used to be a hothead, like a super hothead. And you wouldn't know that once he became Ozeki, because he actually was very calm, didn't say a lot in interviews, didn't show a lot of emotion. So now here's Takakeisho, who just keeps getting injured and injured and injured. He can't do what he wants to do. And Ichinojo is that brick wall that he can't overcome. Just the dynamics of short Takakeisho crashing into the largest human in sumo, at least in the upper division, it just doesn't work. And so there's no way for him to fight him and not have an issue. So he's already frustrated every time he fights Ichinojo, and probably a little afraid. And add on to it, Ichinojo does have some sneak hair pulling situations. He had his fingers in the top knot the last time he fought Takakeisho. I've seen him do it before. I can't know what's in his mind. I don't know if it's one of those cheat things where it's like you're just trying to get a little leverage, but you're not breaking the rules, or if it's an accident. But I could see Takakeisho feeling like, you've done this to me before. And so now he's even more mad. However, he still, doesn't look good of an Ozeki. I still like him anyway. Sorry. I'm being as neutral as I can be, but I do like him. I wish him well. I wish that things would turn around for him, but it looks like he may have reached his ceiling, and Ozeki is the only thing he's going to be able to do. So we sort of touched on Shodai. He's rising again. He's 5-4. He's fully capable of beating everybody again, which I wouldn't have said the last time he was Kadoban. But we saw him end up going 9-6, and we weren't expecting that from him. We thought he would lose out on the last couple of days. So I'm going to say Shodai is capable of righting his ship again and doing the same thing again. But then it's very disappointing to the fans that the very next tournament, he's going to lose again. And he's going to look poor unless, he has this motivation that he struggles to have. So when you put these three guys together and just sort of the last 5 years of Ozeki / Yokozuna Sumo, you see a major problem that I don't know. I haven't watched sumo long enough to understand what the Ozekis of the past were like. It's something I'm going to sort of work on in the next month. Is there a big change between the Ozekis of the past and this current generation? Or is it something to do with the rules? Or is it something to do with just the body types of people today? You'll see in other sports, like baseball, for instance, the training is just so different. The 1970s baseball players could smoke a pack of cigarettes, hit a bunch of home runs, and win for their team. You couldn't do something like that today. Is there something different about the physicality of sumo today than the past? But here's sort of my take on the state of Ozeki. It's the only position where this is both a pro and a con, where you get to have a losing tournament and not lose your rank, but then immediately you're put in this state of now you have to win or you lose your rank. And it's so hard to get Ozeki in the first place that it's a complete disaster when somebody's in that situation. And we've had for the last, at least since 2018, this sort of bouncing up and down, Kadoban, not Kadoban, Kadoban, not Kadoban, until whoever was in that state just eventually gets dropped out and gone. Injuries are a big part of this. When you're Ozeki, everybody's gunning for you, and I think injuries are what are knocking everybody out. And, once you get to Yokozuna, you can sit out for a couple tournaments with an injury and you're fine. You can't do that as an Ozeki. And I don't know if that would be better than this whole Kadoban thing. I think it would be better. And maybe sumo guys, the actual guys who make these rules have a reason for what they've done. I think instead of having okay, you've lost, now you got one shot to get your rank back or keep your rank, why not give them one tournament off? Or why not treat them the way you treat the Yokozuna? Because I don't see how we're ever going to have Ozeki stay unless that's the goal, because they keep getting injured. Mitakayumi's a brand new Ozeki, gets injured right away. Takakeisho, brand new Ozeki, 22 years old at the time, gets injured right away. Shodai, he's a curious case. I don't know what's going on with Shodai. Tochinoshin was already a guy who was on his last legs, makes this push. He was ready for Ozeki Sumo, and he did what he could do. But then that was done. Takayasu, the back. These injuries keep these guys, if they can't hurry up and make a Yokozuna run, they're done for. So I just think there's got to be something in place for injuries, especially now that you've added this weird COVID thing. It's given an excuse now. You've made an exception for COVID with the Ozeki. Maybe you just need to get rid of this Kadoban thing. Or else you're just never going to have healthy Ozekis. They're going to go in and fight when they're Kadoban, get more injured, and they will never be who they could be. So that's what I think. I think we will constantly be in this situation if we don't figure out something. With that being said, someone like Takakeisho or Tochinoshin, maybe having a tournament off wouldn't make a difference. Maybe just the injuries are a part of being Ozeki, and maybe this is the fate of Ozeki. So when I go back and do sort of the history of Ozeki, I'm going to see how long each guy stayed, or if this has just always been the Ozeki, prior to the fact that Ozeki used to be the top rank, and then Yokozuna was a later addition. So I'm going to read a couple of the comments here. John says, there is no good way to handle it. If it were me, I would simply take the score that a guy left with. Say he left on day 9 with 5 wins and 4 losses. I would consider that a small kachikoshi. That's an interesting idea, because at least he was, he had more wins than losses. That might be a way to think about it. Like if a guy was 1-6 and then he left, you might just say, hey, you're going to lose your rank. It's an interesting concept. I mean, definitely COVID has made it necessary to add further rules at this point. So, I like that. And then Michael says, for me, it was like drawing a foul in basketball. I didn't really have a problem with it. I would prefer Gyoji picking the absolute worst moment to stop a fight mid-bout to have a Moashi tied. Okay, so that's referring to the whole Terano Fuji Wakamoto Haro situation. That was also very strange. This is adding to, Michael mentioned earlier, this is a crazy basho. It's crazy for reasons that I didn't expect. You have COVID running rampant, and you have one day a stable's there, the next minute the whole stable's gone. So you've got chaos there. Then you have this weird, Terano Fuji Wakamoto Haro situation. And, I really enjoyed Chris Sumo explaining some of it, because it was confusing. It was very confusing. That particular Gyoji, one of the guys who comes on and chats with us, was talking about how a while ago he actually had a stroke. And he's at the center of controversy a lot. He's fallen off the ring. He's gotten in the way of guys. He's gotten wrong calls. I don't know if maybe there's some impairment because of the stroke he had, and they're just, the Japanese way is to continue on no matter what. But definitely, like, the Gyoji running in and almost hitting Terano Fuji with the fan, that was chaotic. And like I said, it's one of those things where, maybe the guy's not up for the job, but maybe there's nobody they want to promote. I don't know. But that kind of thing seems to happen to him a lot, unfortunately. So, yeah, you've got COVID, you've got that, you've got Takakeisho in the top knot. It kind of reminded me of like a pro wrestling fight, where, you're trying to get a pop from the crowd, even though Takakeisho was definitely not trying to do that. He just it was sort of a desperation move, I'm guessing. Because if he goes at Ichinojo the way he wants to go at Ichinojo, he's going to tweak the neck. I mean, I don't know how he's fighting. I mean, the injury that Takakeisho sustained is the same one that Ishiura sustained. And Ishiura is down to Makushita now. Now, Ishiura is a much smaller man than Takakeisho, but, I mean, Takakeisho is battling with a significant injury for sumo. I mean, it's a significant injury to hurt your neck, period. But sumo, how do you have a tachi if you can't crash into the guy? I guess you do what Shodai does. And that was actually a topic I wanted to bring up too, is this sort of weird, there's the head first tachi and then there's what I call the absorption tachi. And Shodai does the absorption tachi. He just stands there and lets somebody crash into him. And Takakeisho's sort of in an in-between here where he's almost like sort of crashing into you, sort of absorbing it. I don't think he knows what to do. But I find the absorption tachi to be very comical. It kind of reminds me of like Dragon Ball Z when everybody was fighting Majin Buu. It's like they're just bouncing off of him and he's laughing and having a good old time. So that's where we're at. It's going to be very, very interesting to see who wins this one. Either Teruno Fuji's just going to do what he does and run away with it at the very end, where he wins on like day 14, or we're going to have a new winner. Yeah, I don't think, nobody on this list, unless Takakeisho suddenly pulls a miracle. No one else on this list has ever won a tournament. And it's been a while since we've had that. Some people, they don't like that. They want to see like the top guys win the top prize. Some people absolutely love the chaos. I'm somewhere in the middle because I did enjoy watching Hakuho win title after title. But I'm hungry for the next guy. I'm hungry for the next speech. I love the speeches when a new guy wins and like watching them and they don't know where to stand and they don't know how to accept the cup. And they might say something like really entertaining in their speech or cry or, it's exciting to think about somebody new winning. And yes, Michael, I think Kota Nowaka is primed to have a moment. He just seems like the kind of fighter that's going to take off. So I would love it. I would love it if this is his time. I don't want to like push Teruno Fuji out the door quite yet, simply because I know we're on borrowed time with him. He wanted to get 10 tournament, 10 U shows, and then I think then he's going to retire. So I think that's his goal. If he can do 10, he's out as soon as he does the 10th. If he keeps getting injured, like if his knees are not in a good state now, he might be just saying, okay, let me check the next tournament. Let me check the next tournament. And we're just going to have a surprise. Okay, Teruno Fuji retired. So I don't want to push him out the door, but I am hungry for a new winner. I really, really want to see somebody win. And it would be hilarious if it comes down to Kota Nowaka and Nishiki Fuji, because that 17, that Maegashira 17, those are always special wins. It's very, very special wins. So, we are going to see who comes out on top very, very soon. I'm predicting maybe day 11. Maybe day 11 is when we're going to get a better picture. These guys are going to have to start fighting each other and stuff like that. And then that's going to weed everybody out. They don't like to have a huge list of people who are tied. No, John, he didn't say he'd be out on the 10th. I'm sort of reading between the lines, which I've learned to do watching certain other fighters. Like, I was totally shocked when Hakuho did what he did. But it turns out like he had been giving us hints all along of how this was going to go. So I'm taking it as a hint that Teruno Fuji said, "I'd like to win 10 Yusho." That does not mean that's a guarantee. It just means that he made a statement. It really has to do, though, with the state of his knees. He can have any plan in the world. If his knees go out tomorrow, it's done. If he starts winning all the tournaments without any problems at all, he might go for 11, 12, 13. I mean, why not? He's already outpaced Kakuryu, who was a Yokozuna for far longer than he was. So, Teruno Fuji's got one of the great comeback stories in sumo, because not only did he come all the way back from the lowest division, he ascends so quickly and becomes Yokozuna. And it tells you, like, what it really takes to be the top guy. What it really, really takes is something special. And you're only going to get it in a very small percentage of guys. So we have a lot of hopes and dreams for our Ozekis and our future Ozekis. But the truth of the matter is, it's only going to be one or two guys who really can do what it takes to be a Yokozuna, who really have what it takes to be an Ozeki and face all that pressure and keep yourself in physical condition. Even Hakuho, when he got promoted to Ozeki, he got injured in the very next tournament. Could you imagine if what's happened to all these other guys had happened to Hakuho, where he was perpetually injured? Yeah, we wouldn't have one of the greatest sumo wrestlers of all time. So we got two guys in here. I'm going to ask you for your predictions. Michael, John, who do you think is going to win this tournament? I don't know if I'm going to actually venture my thought. I put in my dream matchup. But my dream matchup's a little tough because I also want Toby Zarro in that conversation. So I want Toby Zarro in there, Kota Nowaka, Nishiki Fuji. I like Nishikigi and I like Teruno Fuji as well, but I'm just really hungry for those younger guys. And I got a soft spot for Toby Zarro because he's just wild and crazy, and I love that. So, do you guys have an idea of who you think will win? It's probably gonna be Teruno Fuji. Michael says, give me Kota Nowaka to break through. I like it. I think it's a good pick, and it's definitely the exciting pick. I mean, we've been predicting for a while that Kota Nowaka was going to do big things. And John says, I would always guess Teruno Fuji at this point, although at this point you have to wonder who will make it to the end with all the COVID tests. That is sort of the elephant in the room, isn't it? Now, we know Teruno Fuji had COVID. When did he have COVID? He had it after, was it after March or after May? If it was after, it was probably after March, so it's possible for him to get it again. And yeah, like, could you imagine if COVID swept through all these guys? That would be an absolute disaster. It'd be a disaster for the Sumo Association too, because they've been trying to prove all this time that they got it. They got this together, but they don't. You guys can't control a virus. It kind of owns itself. So they're really not going to be too happy if COVID sweeps through and we just got to survive another couple of days. But yeah, a healthy Teruno Fuji is always the safe bet. But with that being said, his knees have been tested this tournament. Everybody's sort of gunning for, they know that if they can get him, he's kind of got this strategy of putting the right foot forward to brace himself so that he doesn't have to put too much strain on the knees. And Tamawashi was actually the guy who exploited him in that situation. And then the very next tournament was when, Teruno Fuji didn't even continue. So I keep looking to see if he's having any bracing issues. I mean, if you look at his footwork and his positioning, you will see how delicate he is when he is engaging. Like, he doesn't make unnecessary steps because he knows one wrong tweak and he is done. So it seems like it's good. You know, the tournament that he dropped out of, I could tell he was hurt. I could tell he wasn't going to make it. I don't have any of those feelings now, but there's several days to go. If he drops out for any reason, then we definitely have a free-for-all, because all we have are people who have never won before, with the exception of Takekeisho. And like I said, I don't think he's up for it. I know he wants to be up for it. I know he's, you know, in his heart, he can do it. But his body, I don't know. Yes, Tamawashi does have a reputation for injuring guys. He is responsible for knocking Chiyonokuni all the way down. That was a crusher for me. Chiyonokuni was one of my favorites. He was one of the first guys I saw when I was watching sumo for the first time. I love the fact that he was Chiyono Fuji's subject. Wow. You know, that was his stable master. I absolutely loved that. You know, here was this history, and he had the same sort of brawling. He had a very similar physique, not nearly as good as Chiyono Fuji's, but he had a similar physique. He had a similar approach and style, and Tamawashi just, like, I think it was the elbow, just broke the elbow, and that was it. That was the thing that Tamawashi would do, is that Kimidashi, which Teruno Fuji does now, and he would, you know, bust elbows with that Kimidashi. Teruno Fuji, for credit, I mean, I never see him hold back. Like, he's going to take you out. But at the same time, I've never seen him injure anybody in this current state that he's in. So you got to give him credit for that. So it looks like Kota Nowaka is the favorite behind Teruno Fuji, which I totally understand. I'm kind of on board with that. I think that my favorite is Toby Zarro, but the chance of him being in this conversation in even a day or two seems pretty unlikely. So we'll have to see how that goes, but it could be very entertaining. And the question is, you know, do you have less pressure? Like Kota Nowaka right now, he's just in a sea of guys who can go for it. So the light is not on him. When Ichinojo was the sole top guy, there has to be a lot of pressure because the reporters are asking you questions and the fans are yelling at you, even like as you're approaching the stadium. And you, even if you're like, no, I'm not thinking about a tournament win this time, I'm just taking it one day at a time, you almost say that to convince yourself. I think this is a comment from Tulio. How about Shodai if somehow he keeps his streak going till the end? Well, Shodai at this point is 5-4. So we'd have to have a pretty chaotic ending for Shodai to be in this conversation. But this tournament is looking like we could have a chaotic end. Between COVID knocking guys out, including Ichi Yamamoto, who was in this conversation, 7-2, it could take anybody out. COVID could take anybody out. And then all of a sudden you could be left with the guys who have 4 losses. So, yeah, Shodai could be in this conversation. And, you know, the previous Kataban tournament for him, he made a difference in the outcome of the entire tournament. He was beating the top guys at the end, playing spoiler. And I kept thinking to myself, wow, if he just didn't lose so many matches, he could have been in the tournament running. But he puts himself in these bad positions right off the rip, and now he can't even challenge for the tournament. It's unfortunate. I wouldn't be too surprised if, I think I'm gonna guess it's gonna be a 12-3 person who wins the tournament. I doubt very much, unless it's Teruno Fuji. Teruno Fuji could win 13-2. But if he loses again, I don't think he gets knocked out and somebody else has only 2 losses. I think it'll be 12-3. And I think it's also very possible for 11-4 because it is chaotic. I just hope we don't wind up with like a 10-5. It's like now we're really lowering the standards here. Yes, I definitely agree, Tulio. 12-3. That seems to actually be the standard lately. I don't know if anybody has remembers what the records have been. Let's see if we can pull it up on our screen here. Let's see. Marches, information. I know there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Tournament records. Let's see if that gives us what we want. Actually, maybe even... Okay. This is current. I don't know if I can change. I don't think I can change it. So let's see what happens with tournament champions list. It'd be great if they gave us... Oh, this looks like it's all current. Tournament records. I think that's what we were just in. Okay, I'd have to go to a different website to get previous information, it looks like. Okay, well, that's okay. We'll figure it out. Michael says, anyone surprised by the warm reaction from the crowd that Asanoyama has received in his return? I'm not surprised, and I'll tell you there's a couple of reasons why. One is that, in a way, Asanoyama kind of got screwed over. You know, everybody was sneaking out for COVID restrictions, including his, sumo coach who gets kicked out, and there's all this pressure, and they only go after Asanoyama. It just seemed kind of ridiculous. It's like, did somebody just really have it out for him? And then you add to it that his father died. So he gets this terrible demotion that wasn't fair. And then his father dies out of nowhere. He wasn't sick. It was probably like a heart attack or something. And his father wasn't that old. So now, like, he hasn't lost everything, but it's like he lost everything. He loses Ozeki. He's got to watch himself drop tournament after tournament after tournament. And then his dad dies. So now his dad's never going to see him go back to whatever he's going to ascend to. I mean, that's got to be gut-wrenching. And then Chris Sumo mentioned someone else close in his life died too, right after his dad. And then, Asanoyama had the same situation where he begged his new coach, because his old coach is gone. He begged his coach to let him retire, and he said, no, I'm not going to let you retire. Yeah, his father died, like, suddenly, right after the demotion. And they had some sort of conversation where his father was encouraging him, like, you can get back. And I'm sure Asanoyama relied on his dad to be, like, the fighting force for him, and then he just dies. It's such a cruel fate. And I'm pretty sure, the sumo fans all know this, and they're rooting hard for him. They want him to be the next Teruno Fuji in terms of, like, fighting all the way back from the bottom, becoming Yokozuna. What's interesting is he changed his... I always get this screwed up. Sorry, I'm not perfect with the Japanese language. His second name, I don't know if it's his last name or his first name, he changed his sumo name to his father's name. So he is now fighting under a new sumo name. So it's Asanoyama, then his father's name. He's fighting under that name now. And he's going to fight for his father. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't feel like rooting for the guy then. So John says, I'm happy to see him back. I think it sucks that guys in lower divisions have to face him. That's what's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I mean, I don't want to be somebody who says what people should do when I have no experience. I'm not a sumo wrestler. I'm not a sumo coach. I don't even live in Japan. But come on, it's ridiculous. Here's a guy who was Ozeki, and you're just going to have him in what I would call, like, show matches. The best thing, exactly, it is like a black belt fighting a white belt. Ah, thank you, Tulio. Yes, Asanoyama Hiroki. It seems like such a waste of time. It's like, okay, so you're going to drop him all the way down for a crime that other people had committed, that none of them got as big of a punishment as him. I know it's because he's Ozeki, but still. You're going to drop him all the way down, and then you're going to have him fight these guys that he's definitely going to beat just for the sake of beating them. Why not just say, okay, you can't come back. We're going to put you at Maegashira 17 East, and you can't come back for 2 years or something. And then the punishment is you lose your salary. It doesn't make sense, this demotion thing. It's absolutely ridiculous. But, you know, if I was running sumo, I would be making different changes, and there'd be something I would mess with that would mess with the tradition. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. It really is important for Asanoyama to get back to Ozeki as soon as possible because, you know, time is ticking on these guys. The good thing about Asanoyama that was different about him than every other Ozeki that we have had, he was not chronically injured. His problem was sort of like a Shode problem where he would lose matches he shouldn't lose. I mean, the absolute worst thing that he did, which is losing to Terutsuyoshi with that leg pick. Like, someone as talented as Asanoyama should not be losing by a leg pick. Yeah, he has lost 2 years of fighting the top guys to get back to Ozeki. That should be all the punishment is. It shouldn't be now fight a bunch of guys who have no business being in the ring with you. You've lost 2 years of top level competition. That's going to put you behind. That's all. Or put him in Jurio, okay? If you must put him somewhere, put him in Jurio. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this punishment is wasting everybody's time, and I believe the Sumo Association themselves probably feel the same way. Yes, I do agree with you, Tulio, about Abi. Demotion was great for Abi, and it has the potential to be great for Asanoyama. It was great for Teruno Fuji. Teruno Fuji didn't get demoted because he did something wrong, but Teruno Fuji would drink like a fish, come to tournament, like he had a natural body, a natural ability, and sumo came easy to him. This is that whole, you know, if you watch anime thing, the genius versus the hard worker. Teruno Fuji was the genius. He could just wake up after a night of binge drinking, go in and beat anybody he wanted to beat. And he had a cockiness to him. And then he got cellulitis. He got diabetes. He busted his knees. And all of those injuries, he just drop. And it was a kick to the gut. You know, just that attitude that he had, that confidence that he had, and that destructive nature got knocked right out of him. And then he asked his coach if he could retire 5 times. And his coach said, nope, I'm not going to take your papers. Nope, you can get back. Nope, nice try. And look at what all of that pain and suffering did for Teruno Fuji. He may never have made Yokozuna with the way he was behaving. I mean, he might even have died, you know, drinking the way he was drinking and acting the way he was acting. Yeah. Sumo was a good life lesson for him. All the things that he went through. Tulio says sumo made him realize he could not survive on natural talent alone. Yeah. That's true for any of us in any situation. We might be so naturally gifted at something, but anything could take it away. Anything. COVID is running rampant, you know, and that's a unforeseen thing that no one would have known about 5 years ago. So if you're like on the top of the world and you're like, I'm going to win every tournament, and then COVID hits you and you're out, how could you have foreseen that? So yes, I think perhaps whatever drove Asanoyama to break the rules and to be somewhat, the thing about Asanoyama is he was going to these nightclubs, he was interacting with other people. Personally, I think the rules were stupid. You can't have these guys locked in their stable for 2 years. It's gonna make you crazy. Mental health has to count for something. And now everybody's loose and they're getting COVID anyways. You have to balance these sort of extremes of wanting to protect someone by isolating them, but then you're hurting them by isolating them. It just doesn't work. It looks so great on paper, but it's just a piece of paper. It's not a human being. I don't necessarily blame Asanoyama for wanting to go out and have a good time. I mean, who could survive living in such they live in a more cramped situation than any of us. They live with, 10, 12 other guys in this really tiny place, and everybody knows who they are, so when they sneak out, it's like someone's going to see them. So I don't know what drove him to do what he did beyond what would drive almost any of us. Maybe he was just a little bit too bold about it. Maybe he hung out with the wrong people, and maybe they punished him because he got caught. Maybe that's really what it was about. But you gotta see that there's a possibility for his suffering to really pay off for him in the end, and I hope so. I really, really do. I'm rooting hard for him. So we have from Michael, speaking of Ozeki, do we see Hoshoryu make an Ozeki run in the next year? To me, he looks like he's figuring it out on the fly. I'm excited for him. I think Hoshoryu has such great untapped potential. In fact, I think he could have even done something sooner than he has, but he's got sort of the specter of Uncle Asashoryu hanging over his head. I mean, you hear through some of Chris Sumo's videos, Uncle Asashoryu trashing him on Twitter, trashing him on, TV shows, calling him up on the phone and reaming him out. And this is just, Asashoryu almost trying to motivate Hoshoryu and sort of live vicariously through him, because unfortunately Asashoryu had to crash out because of scandal, and I'm sure he was not ready to be done. So that's sort of a wound and unfinished business, and I think he has the best of intentions for Hoshoryu, but I think he's messing with his concentration. Hopefully Hoshoryu can figure a way through that, but I would not be surprised if Hoshoryu makes an Ozeki run in the next year. I'm a little surprised he hasn't yet, but not surprised because there's a lot of pressure on him. So I would love to see Hoshoryu. Hoshoryu would be able to do some redemption for Asashoryu. He's very different in that he's not being showy, but at the same time, you see that fire in his eyes that you saw with Asashoryu. I mean, he's got this real, fighting spirit, for lack of a better term. You can see how hard he wants it from the tip of his top knot to the bottom of his toes. And I'm watching it on a computer screen, and I can tell just a fraction of how much he wants to win every single fight. That is very refreshing. Particularly when you see guys like Shodai, I'm sure he wants to win, but I don't think he wants to win as much as Hoshoryu. So I believe through sheer desire, Hoshoryu deserves an Ozeki shot, but he's got to put it together. Gaining the weight was really good for him. That's a key. I mean, if he stayed small, he was going to run the risk of being, the most successful small guy that I've heard of is Mainumi, and he wasn't a Yokozuna. So, I mean, you can't be Yokozuna and be a small guy. I really don't think so. Thanks for coming by, John. I'm glad you were here to give us some comments and some questions. It got the conversation going. So, have a good night, and hopefully we'll catch you on the next one. Yeah, Asashoryu, if you watch old fights of Asashoryu with Hakuho, those are some pretty incredible fights. Especially when Hakuho was still green, he wasn't even Ozeki yet. Oh, Just classic. Asashoryu had presence. And yes, I agree that Asashoryu never learned that fine line. You could say that it's a similar vibe to Terunofuji. Terunofuji might have gone out the exact same way as Asashoryu. There was this sort of attitude of that time. Terunofuji had the chip on his shoulder. And that chip on the shoulder knocked out Asashoryu, and it knocked out Harama Fuji. That whole Harama Fuji thing, wow, was that a disaster. I was subscribed to Chris Sumo very early on, and he did have a video about all of that, and I think he's since taken it down. But boy, was that a complex system of, Hakuho, Kakuryu, and, Harama Fuji. Hakuho had a lot to do with that situation too. Yeah, Hakuho knew how to be rebellious with a smile. I mean, he was always pushing the Sumo Association to their limits. If he hadn't won as much as he had won, they would have found a way to kick him out. But he knew the nuance of, I'm going to be me, and I'm going to, kind of fight the Japanese system, but at the same time, I'm going to play the rules enough. And it's paying dividends for him. He's very, very influential in Japan. He has a lot of clout, he has a lot of money, and he's still in high demand, according to Chris Sumo's videos. Like, everybody wants a piece of him. They want him for commercials. They want him for appearances. They want him to speak at events. So, yeah, if you're gonna be the bad guy, pay attention to how Hakuho did it. But what's interesting is when Hakuho first became Yokozuna, he was the counter to Asashoryu. He was the good guy. He was what Yokozunas were supposed to be, because Asashoryu was so, rebellious and hanging out with, gangsters and all this stuff. Hakuho was the golden boy for a very long time. And then all of a sudden he wasn't. Takes one little thing here, one little thing there. And it does have to do with the foreigner concept. Some of that is the way the Japanese approach it, but some of it's also Hakuho himself. When you get a sort of a hot-tempered guy like a Hakuho mixed with a very rigid society like Japan, there's going to be a clashing. He could only be the golden guy for so long. I would not be surprised if Hakuho was top dog at some point. That would not shock me at all. Because he is so influential. He is bigger than life. And I wouldn't say he's as big as like a Roger Federer, for instance. Like, a lot of people know Roger Federer, even if they don't know tennis. But out of all the sumo wrestlers, there's very few that people who don't really watch sumo would know. And Hakuho is one of them. Watching through the Western mindset, but Asashoryu's fire reminds me a lot of American brashness. Well, you got to consider the fact that, Mongolia is sort of, it's full of brashness by necessity. And you could almost compare some of the Mongolian temperament to sort of the American Western. There's a similar vibe there. Like, the tough cowboy kind of thing. Like, you're in this tough terrain. You've got to fight for everything that you want. So I could see that. I could see. I had read this article once about what makes Mongolian sumo wrestlers so good at sumo, and it just has a lot to do with the fact that they ride on horses without a saddle at a very young age. They go through a lot of intense, just regular experiences that I guess you would call training. It's great for building up the muscles, and Mongolian wrestling is sort of their big sport import. That's what Hakuho's father was and won a gold medal for. So wrestling in general is so big in Mongolia, but it's more primitive. I mean, they're out there wrestling in the elements and, like I said, bareback on horses, and they're just tough. They're really tough by necessity. And it is very similar to me of the old American Western. Tulio says Hakuho was the goat Rikishi. Now he's going for goat Oyakata. I agree. I think there's no stopping the Hakuho train. He is the future of sumo. Unless, you see what happened to Taka no Hana. I think that was probably pretty shocking. But Taka no Hana, Japanese. It's very different when a Japanese guy sort of gives up on the system. I don't think Hakuho was willing to give up. They'd have to push him out pretty hard, and they would not be able to save face that way. So it will be tough. It would be very, very tough for them to kick Hakuho out, even if they want to. He's sort of their necessary evil, because they don't have the sport that they have without Hakuho. We are a long way away from ever getting a new Hakuho. We might be like 10, 20, 50 years, maybe never, because of just the way that people approach things. They actually got divorced too, didn't they? I'm pretty sure Taka no Hana divorced his wife and like doesn't talk to his son anymore. I mean, I think Taka no Hana's like out in the wilderness somewhere, just done with everybody and everything. But, when he was Yokozuna, I'm sure people expected him to be a major force. And then just everything fell apart. And a lot had to do with the Takanoiwa thing too, which Hakuho has his part to play in that situation. So who knows? I mean, I'd love to know the intricacies. There's so much more to that story that we'll never know, being non-Japanese citizens. Yeah, it's a shame somebody who could be on such a high level as Taka no Hana just disappears into obscurity. And that, that messed up Takakeisho pretty good. I mean, he was brand new into his, I believe Taka no Hana left when Takakeisho, it was either when he was on his Ozeki bid or as soon as he became Ozeki. I think it was when he was on his Ozeki bid. All of a sudden, here goes his coach. And he was named after Taka no Hana. So he's never had stable training. Uncle Waka no Hana. Yeah, but where is he? Is he on the sidelines? I don't remember seeing him, but I haven't been looking for him either. Sumo is a wild, wild time. There is so much politics, so much culture, and then you just throw that in with like just unforeseen things. Oh, okay. He comments for Abema. Is that how you watch sumos through Abema? A lot of times I catch it through NHK, so I'm missing like half the situation. Well, guys, I think I'm going to be wrapping this one up. If we found this to be successful, I'd love to do more in between tournaments. That way we can kind of just talk whatever sumo we want to talk. I know that's not like a big thing on YouTube. Everybody like sort of posts the matches and gives their commentary, and then everybody comments in the comment section. I think it would be cool if we could get like just sumo live chats going where we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. So we'll see how this one goes. I mean, I enjoyed this conversation with the people who came. Thank you, Tulio. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. I would love to make this a more regular thing. So, feel free to leave comments in the comment section. It'd be nice if we could get this channel to more people. I know we're sort of low tech in terms of we don't have the stunning visuals or anything, but we're fun. So let's see if we can get people to come and join the fun. And I definitely had fun with all you guys. Thank you for bringing up some topics. I was like, what happens if I run out of things to say? So thank you all very much. Have a good night. Good luck with the tournament. And we will definitely be doing the usual recap show. There should be nothing stopping at this time. It should be me and John. And we'll go from there. if everything goes well, I'm going to just do these random live streams when I can, and we'll see who shows up, and we'll have fun. I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about in between COVID, scandals, rankings charts, whatever other crazy surprises come. So thank you all very much. Have a good night, and we'll see you at the end of the tournament.